Hey, everybody. Welcome from our new office for BGW. I'm going to start a new office here at Isle of Palms in South Carolina, but it's colder here today than it is in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. Believe that or not. Oh, my goodness. As everybody's ramping on here, use the Q&A button. And you can harass us in the chat, but use the questions and answers for questions and answers. And we will answer those things live. So I don't know. I'm hoping I have enough gas to get back to Charlotte. Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, there's plenty of stuff going on. I know we had an alert go out today. Speaking of shortages, it sounds like we're running dangerously low on funds for some of the restaurant stuff. So I think, Adam, you'll want to talk about some of that. And I'm sure, Jack, you've got some other stuff too. So I'm going to actually throw it over to you, Adam, first and see what you got.
Sure. I'm wearing my sweatshirt because it is not as nice and sunny and warm here in Charlotte as it is where you're at, Gary. So anyway, yeah.
Sunny now, but it's not warm.
Yeah, a couple things this week, with PPP funds, even though the deadline was May 31st, they're running low on fuel. Thus, they're being extremely niche and specific with who will get awarded PPP funds from here on out. And I don't know if Jack's got stats for us this week, but if you hadn't already applied for a PPP round 2 loan, unless you're fitting a very specific niche, that I would not count on that anymore. And then on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, it looks like the demand was 2x what the funds were, or somewhere in that order. So that's another one where I don't know how they'll end up dealing with the 2x demand, whether they'll just say, hey, it's first come, first serve, or they'll do something a little bit similar to what they did with the EIDL program initially, which was to just, make some quote unquote arbitrary choices about what people received in some sort of pro rata amount. Yeah, I think given this administration, the more likely scenario is that, the lower requests with some sort of status will probably get the lion's share of the lion's share of full amounts, with some sort of prorated amounts for larger requests. But who really knows? We haven't gotten much guidance on what they'll do since the application was oversubscribed relative to what the initial fund request is. So that's the big stuff for this one. I think if we go back to the tax law changes that are proposed, I really think that if you look at the infrastructure negotiations, I'm still going to lean on. I think that the way that that's going to get, because both sides are for infrastructure, which would be a great win, especially. I don't know if anybody's actually driven across that bridge they talked about. They found a crack in between Tennessee and Missouri across the Mississippi River, but it is a big freaking bridge that is very, very long. And having driven across it several times, I really don't know how the hell you would actually get across the Mississippi if you were not crossing that bridge. So, Lord knows we need it. So the I think I'm still kind of bullish on, enforcement, number one. So that's $1 trillion if they just enforce the laws that are on the books. That allows Republicans and Democrats both just to say, hey, baby, we're just enforcing the laws that are on the books, going after the bad people. That seems like an easy win. And I think the second win, it'd be very nuanced, but when the Republicans have talked about hey, we're not really willing to open up the American Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They haven't, they've been mostly saying that related to the business provisions of it and the individual income tax rate provisions of it, which makes me feel like, estate taxes, which would have two components, one is a reduction in the estate tax limitation itself, combined with taxing unrealized gains. I feel like, look, if there's going to be compromise that happens on the table, it's going to happen there, and that we stand a chance of being pretty safe on tax rates generally, and then the capital gains tax. Because I think they're just saying, look, we're not willing to open up the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That to me tells me that they're not really willing to. Well, capital gains were part of the Tax Cuts Job Act because they were already low, so we will go ahead and let you do something on that. Technically speaking, the estate tax raise was part of it, but it was already built into sunset. So I don't, and I mean, you're talking about like a 2-year window of that between when it was already going to sunset naturally anyway, and them getting aggressive and passing something for 2022. So I totally see, a compromise being, sure, we'll give you the money to raise the number of people at the IRS to go after people who legitimately owe money, one. And then two, you can tax the dead people. That's okay. Because we were going to go ahead and let that. We even voted as Republicans to tax the dead people just in 2025, not 2022 or 2023. So that, again, if I'm reading the tea leaves, that's what I'm feeling pretty bullish on. Somebody's also going to ask a question about North Carolina PPP deductibility. Still haven't done anything. Thanks, General Assembly. Really appreciate you there. One of only 3 states in the country who has not done anything to allow for the deduction of PPP expenses. So unfortunately, we've had to advise our clients that, look, I mean, the law as it currently is you got to pay it. Now we may be able to, obviously, if they then change the rules, we can amend the return and apply the money forward. But as the law is, as it stands right now, you got to pay it, which is just absolutely freaking ridiculous. So anyway, that's where we stand today, Gary.
Man, that's good. Jack, I know that now that you've gotten back on here, had some connectivity problems. Hopefully it wasn't electricity or some sort of energy related issue. Otherwise we're in real trouble. I'm sure you've got some diatribe to go on to too.
Sure, absolutely. Well, sometimes I feel like we're in the middle of the Dharma initiative, and so it was an earpiece that I was switching to and then just completely froze. I mean, with the gas stuff and with PPP and with all this stuff going on, it's just like, yeah, it's been fun. So a couple things. Since I missed the first minute or two, and then I kind of joined in when you were talking about the estate and gift taxes. So and other things that have been driving our estate planning attorneys crazy. And so you went through some of the numbers, and yeah, it's it dropped from 11.7 million to 3.5 million. But then you have the sunset issues, and then you have estate tax, current flat 40% rate to a progressive of 45%. And then, if you happen to have over $1 billion and you're at 65%. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't think that a whole lot of people, well, if you do have to worry about that, please come and see me. So we can make sure your estate planning is all done correctly. So a couple other things on the, there's still the unemployment issue, and it's really unemployability based on desires of employees, which is they don't want to come back to work. And it's impacting all kinds of industries. It's impacting hospitality and tourism. It's impacting just kind of everyday kind of things. Restaurants. We have friends who are in the restaurant business, and it's, hey, I see that, we walk in, hey, why are the tables not full? Well, we don't have the servers to serve them. So that's why the wait is so long. And I jokingly said, well, you're creating, the appearance of long lines outside that, oh gosh, maybe we need to go there kind of thing. And so there is also, in relation to that, that likely that the extension, that the additional pylon of unemployment dollars is probably not going to continue. And that at least the Senate Democrats have been saying that, and which is a little bit surprising that the money train doesn't continue onward. So I wanted to share that it looks like that may not continue. And also that the refusal to go to work. You can't if you are offered a job and don't go to work, and it's within your abilities, you're not going to get that extra money and possibly forfeit the whole unemployment numbers. I have charts, and I don't know as far as and refer you to the SBA.gov site, and it's updated every week, and it goes through breakdown state by state. It goes through the number of loans approved. So as of the end of last week, 10 million, almost 11 million loans approved for, let's see, that looks like $782 billion by 5,471 lenders. So there's a loan breakdown by first loans, second loans, different types of stuff like that. So interesting information by industry as well. So you can look at that kind of stuff. And so I think that is about everything that I wanted to share, at least initially for now.
So we have a political question. Well, kind of. It's really not party specific by any means, but and then we've got a PPP. So I'll start with the political one first, just because it ties into the diatribe on the front end. And the question is, why are we stimulating an economy that's already creating inflation, trying to hire people now? So any thoughts? Because the politicians haven't been asking us for some reason. They haven't been calling us about, hey, should we go ahead and make sure that North Carolina is part of the other 47 states that is following the federal mandate? So any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just, Boatsman's kind of Jack theory is that, that I think they're generally making the argument that the inflation number, and it seems logical, in some respects. Remember, I'm libertarian, by the way. That on the inflation side, that a lot of that is being driven by supply chain issues that are just making their way into other sectors. I mean, if inflation was measured by the price of lumber and construction prices, we would have said we would have had inflation, a year ago, just based on how much, raw materials in the construction industry have gone up in construction costs due to the temporary disruption in the supply chain. So, that's kind of one argument for, hey, this is only just temporary as we bleed off the demand. I agree with that statement, but at the same time, if you talk to our clients, keeping in mind that I'm libertarian, they'd echo some of the comments that Jack was saying that, look, man, I mean, even independent of people, collecting unemployment or not collecting unemployment, people just aren't working like they used to. I mean, meaning like there's just some, Jack threw out the Dharma Initiative. I'm going to throw out malaise. Jack's laughing. You can't see his camera there. They just, there's just there's like still just a fog that's just sitting over, productivity generally, I think. And, I haven't looked at, what are the productivity numbers that are sitting out there. Who knew that we're turning into the business network? But I would suspect that, there's probably a correlation between, what we're seeing and then also just a reduction in industrial productivity or just something, like that generally. So I can't really say, hey, is that really tied back to the unemployment benefit or not? I mean, obviously the unemployment benefits are hitting some parts of the economy, with people still staying at home. The argument for that is, well, geez, I mean, they still don't have places to do daycare and stuff like that. So it is hard for people to actually return to work. Maybe there's some safety issues, what have you. But at the same time, even with the people that are going back to work, the work level and the output level is not there yet to burn through the pent-up demand, which, if you kind of flow that all the way back to raw steel somewhere, there you go. There's your price increase, even to the point where, hey, people aren't working as hard. Well, it could be that, it's because you literally, they can't get people to work extra hours to clear off the freaking shipping containers that are sitting off the port of Los Angeles. I mean, that's not speculation. Like, that's literally happening, right now. So it just feels like the inflation probably is temporary. However, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a stretch to say that there's a one-to-one correlation between that and the unemployment benefits. I think where that will show up will be, let's see what happens in the states that are starting to shut off the unemployment benefits. I want to say South Carolina did, off the top of my head. I think Wyoming went to either Wyoming or Montana went to a hybrid approach, which they shut off the unemployment, but they're paying a bonus for people to go back to work. So I think there'll be, there's some test cases on what actually happens by doing that to see if there's a correlation or not. I just know that based on our client base, it's less about people on unemployment and not working. It's more like they just aren't working like they used to.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that, and I think we will have a challenge here at our law firm as well with a couple of concepts. One is that, hey, people can work remotely and the world didn't fall apart. The lights are still on, which you can't see because there's it's a green screen behind me. But if we were actually in the lobby of our office, the lights are still on. It is also the, hey, it has helped with childcare, has, all those things on the one side. And it's like, okay, is there a way to do this? And even on this morning on NPR, they were talking about the fact that, you need to be careful on demanding people coming back to the office because they may have a BBD, that's code for a bigger, better deal, elsewhere where they can work from home. And so, if you really want to keep your employees, you might need to consider whether or not you can force that to happen. Then you have the issues of, what are you going to do about COVID? Are you going to require people to have shots? Are you going to require the distancing? How are you going to police the people who say, hey, I've gotten the shot, so I don't need to wear the mask, versus the others who have said, well, I'm not going to get the shot until there's more research, or just have whatever fundamental difference in not getting the shot for whatever reason. So you have all those issues, and those are practical issues. Those are legal issues that are going to impact businesses and owners making certain decisions on how they're going to proceed forward. I think that a lot of us business owners have put in place the infrastructure because of necessity and survivability to be able to work remotely. And it has worked smoothly, but I think there are some employees that will take advantage of that. So are they really as productive? And so, for example, yesterday we had our first corporate group meeting of the year, and there were people that were in the office, and we were at capacity. I mean, this is a huge boardroom, and our capacity is 9 or 10. We snuck some people in, didn't tell our office manager, but and then some people remotely. And the people that were on remotely, I know some of them are just haven't been spending a whole lot of time at the office this year, but they're productive. And there are some, and not, thankfully not in our office, but in other offices that are maybe not as productive at home. And you can see the differential between them being physically here and being elsewhere and kind of dialing it up whenever they need to, and going only to the extent of the capacity that is required of them in the moment. And so, you know, a lot of psychology, a lot of business, a lot of finance, all involved in these decisions. So yeah, I agree. I mentioned the, you know, the money, but that is just a you know, one of the variables and components that we have to deal with, and the reasons why perhaps people are not coming back to their jobs in an efficient and timely manner.
I know you want to share your screen, Jack, but before you do, and I've made you host so you can do that, I wanted to get to this question on PPP forgiveness. So here's the question. Wanted to know what the risk is for applying for PPP forgiveness if when we applied back in January, our financial condition wasn't clear, but now we're profitable again. Our intention is to apply for forgiveness in a few months. Thanks.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's, you know, the entirety of the program is predicated on it's a completely what if scenario. So if you look at round one, you know, financial condition was immaterial to the question because you didn't know what was going to happen when you took the funds. And the only place where it may but probably won't come back will be if you took more than $2 million. So if you apply that same logic to PPP2, to even qualify for PPP2, you were already harmed because you were down 25%. So I see it, I really see financial condition and what really happened being immaterial to the forgiveness process, but for the loans that are north of 2 million, you know, still, you know, going to be the same, which actually you couldn't have a loan more than 2 million in PPP2. So, you know, I don't see it being an issue.
Yeah, I would think that. So a couple things. First, it's a stitch in time that they're looking at. So they want, you know, they're saying, okay, what did you know at the time, and did you apply in good faith, and all those kind of reasonableness factors that go into it. Now, having said that, if at that time there were some questions or manipulation, fraud, okay, that obviously is going to be a problem. Now, what do you do with the people that are in the middle, which is like, okay, I am, and this is more of a guilty conscious kind of thing versus it being, okay, you're obviously within the factors in the formula, you meet the criteria, but especially with the second round, third round kind of thing, it's, you know, yeah, we qualify, but do we really need the money? And I go back to, well, you know, if you're going to get into a subjective analysis like that, then you look into, okay, why did you not need the money? Is it again because the owners reinvested money into the business? Is it because the owners were a bit more business savvy because they were conservative, that they, you know, were working 22 hours a day instead of having other employees? You know, what are those subjective factors that go into it? So, you know, I think that I have clients and friends who are kind of, okay, you know, what is the right thing to do from a legal perspective, from a business perspective, and then they're kind of struggling with maybe the ethics of taking money that they didn't necessarily need, but, you know, was the need quelled because of something you did proactively? So just be aware of that. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing with blinders on, moving with blinders on, what was the condition at the time of application? And as Adam said, they're not necessarily looking at what the after effects of that are. It's what was happening at the time.
Yeah, and I feel like the you know, the more likely higher risk item is the employee retention tax credit, and that's really specific to the exception whereby you're considered an essential business or you've got a disruption associated with the business and the supply chain that, you know, even though, you know, dental practice is a real easy case to make. So dental practice or medical practice in general, considered essential, but really that was focused on emergency, hey, Amazon guy, really that was focused on emergency procedures. So elective procedures got pushed. So there was an exception in one of the exceptions you could apply for with the employee retention tax credit is that, you know, look, if I analyze everything, but if I break this down into a, you know, material business segment, which material was defined as 10% or greater of your revenues, then I can look at that business segment as a standalone item for the purposes of evaluating the employer retention tax credit. That being said, they didn't provide a lot of other guidance around, okay, well, but how much does the revenue need to be down? And when do you stop taking the credit, you know, from there? And if in general, you know, all of the businesses are up, you know, 200%, but this thing just hasn't come back. I see him going after that potentially because, I mean, you know, PVP, it's like you didn't know what the hell was going on. Oh my God, I don't know what the future's going to hold. The employer retention tax credit, you actually have the benefit of facts because it's retroactive. So I just I'm feeling more cautious on that one than I am PPP.
So Joe has a question for you, Jack, and here's the situation. You provide on-site service to financial institutions, and the financial institutions specified that only those people who've been vaccinated can work in their facilities. Can an employer legally make this an employment requirement?
So the answer is maybe, of course, right? And here's the reason why, is that at this point, yes, employers can make the rules for their facilities. The problem is, and this is going to be a legal battle that extends way beyond today and has already begun as more people get vaccinated, more people come back to work, and employers have to struggle with how do we protect our workers, how do we protect our customers? And so for them, and then you have you know, other restrictions. So for example, could the building itself, security, the owners of the building that I'm in uptown, could they impose certain restrictions? And they have, but you know, they're not really policing it necessarily. It's self-policed. But once you get into our structure here, then you know, there's certain rules that you have to follow, and you know, most people follow the rules. But to say that you cannot come back to work unless you do certain things, I think is potentially problematic, could potentially be discriminatory. But you have this concept of public safety kind of overarching all of this. So, you know, as long as the science and the government essentially says these are the best practices, then I think that businesses, including financial institutions, are going to have some leeway to be able to put rules into place until it gets through the court system. And so under the auspices of public safety. And so, you know, I think restaurants and other places are going to struggle with this. And you know, as far as cleaning and what are their responsibilities. And then there are two issues with that. First is that, you know, did you provide sufficient policies and procedures to follow? And what happens when those procedures are not followed? So it's kind of like a lose-lose scenario in one respect, which is if you don't put the policies in place and post them, then that's a problem. But then if you put the policies in place and post them, but you don't police them and make sure that they are being followed, then you might have another problem too. And there are lawsuits out there for unsafe work environments, unsafe places of you know, restaurants and other places like that, where the public has come in and they're alleging that the person got sick, and compound that with finding out that the worker had COVID, especially in the food service business. We represent a lot of people, a lot of businesses in hospitality, which is restaurants and hotels and things like that. You know, add on top of that when it's found out that there is an employee that had an issue of COVID, positive COVID, and then had access or was touching literally and figuratively other people, and then that person gets COVID. But yet that person, that customer, has had contact with many other people, and who knows if that's really the cause of where they got it. Now all of a sudden you have an employer who is teed up for liability because of that contact tracing. So then you have the issue of, okay, well, do we tell people? You know, what are the responsibilities of an employer, of an owner of a business, to tell employees, to tell customers to do contact tracing? So there's just a lot of spider webs that are being thrown out there that is just going to have to be resolved, and it's going to take a while to resolve those things. Relatedly, since we're talking about things that take a while, I read an article that it's not going to take months necessarily to sort this out, but maybe years, several years, to sort out the forgiveness applications, and especially the higher dollar amounts. But and part of that is not necessarily because of sophistication of the loans or the loan packages, but just the IRS doesn't have the capacity to go through this stuff in an efficient manner. And so I think that that's kind of the next challenge, is getting the IRS bolstered enough to be able to get through this stuff, meaning IRS, SBA, et cetera. So we'll see how all that shakes out too, but I wouldn't be surprised if that you don't see a forgiveness on the subsequent rounds anytime in the near future. I think it's going to be pushed out down the road, especially if it gets flagged for something, whether it's a legitimate flag or whether it is one of the algorithmic flags that we've talked about, that it just because it doesn't, you know, doesn't exactly fit through the funnel and it gets caught up, that it's going to get pushed back and needs some human review versus artificial intelligence processing.
So think about this, you have to go back in your memory banks. This goes back a long time, you know, like not even a week, but, you know, back before we had gas shortages and stuff like that, if you can remember back that far. So by the way, thank you, Robert Mayetta, for giving me an early warning system alert that, hey, there's been a Colonial Pipeline hack and you might want to go fill up your car with gas. I'm glad I did that for my wife's car and mine before we headed down here. But the question has been, and I got a couple of these late last week, again, when we still had gas and all that, and it had to do with ERC and wondering why the payroll companies were so hesitant to help with ERC calculations. And, you know, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Have you also seen that or not?
I'm only speculating, but you know, as with all things, you know, I can say this because I don't have my law license, even though I wish that I did. You know, it's just really that the determination of whether or not you qualify for the credit and how much the credit could be is based on facts and circumstances that are outside of the payroll company's control. So I didn't see a single payroll company that said, we'll totally help you calculate the credit and figure out if you qualify or not, because you'd have to find out, did they take PPP funds? You know, what was their application? What was their cover period? You know, all that kind of, you know, plus some other circumstances around revenue and stuff like that. It's just outside of the payroll company's normal course of doing stuff. So I think they went like this. What do you want to put it on the form? And we'll let you put that on the form.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah, exactly what they did. Thank you for the visualization of what was, you know, going through their minds at the time they decided not to help. And I think it's a liability issue. And so, you know, payroll processing companies, right? And so they process stuff. They don't necessarily, you know, and so you give it to them in one format or another. They put it through their machine and they produce output. And so they're not going to, now, if you have a relationship with your payroll processing person, they might say, okay, you know, help you out. But they're not going to put themselves on the line and say, okay, this is the number, or these are the calculations. So that's, again, Jack theory, but I would imagine if you were to ask a payroll company person, that's probably what is on their mind. That that's not our business. Our business is to, again, put stuff into the machine, run it through the machine, put something out of the machine. So anyway, Jack Theory.
The other comment I had regarding that, and this is not to disparage others, but there have been a number of folks out there that we've seen and that we've heard about that are getting solicitations from various individuals and entities that are wanting to do humongous fees to help somebody sort through ERC. And the only thing I guess I would say about that is, know who you're talking to and make sure that you're not getting gouged on that, because we've seen opportunists on that front too. So.
Yeah. To answer David's question, I mean, it's really the tax credit companies or CPA firms that are following the tax credit company model, whereby they're charging a percentage of the credit recovered, up to a cap of, $50,000-$60,000, which, some might argue, well, geez, if I'm getting, somebody $1 million back, isn't $50,000 reasonable? Well, the thing is, it's not really a whole lot of work. It's still a judgment call based on a couple different factors. So it's not the same thing as doing a research and development tax credit study, a cost segregation study. It's just not, having to dig into whether or not somebody qualifies for a jobs credit. That would be the more traditional tax credit percentage type pricing. So I'd agree with Gary that it seemed like gouging very similar to some of the PPP application and refund or loan forgiveness application gouging that we saw.
So on that related subject, before I get into, I knew we could count on David being here. Yes, another good question here, but I'll get into that. But while we're talking about ERC, this is the question. Says, our payroll processing company is actually offered a program in which they take care of calculating the ERTC. Jennifer, let us know who that is. We'll pass that along. Not that you're going to payroll providers because of that, but.
Yeah, and again, I would be leery of that, because to do it correctly, you got to know, PPP, you got to know the cover period, you got to know what the payroll dollars were for that cover period, if there's any excess. If it's simply just saying, how many employees did you have? Well, $7,000 times the employee count. That's one thing, but there's so many other qualifying criteria. I'd be nervous unless they're really going to do a lot of the work. I just would be nervous that they're going to get it correct.
And we got yes and amen from David on that. And I will get to David's question, but I've got a longer one here from Twinette. Oh, and thanks, Jennifer. It was Paychex that had offered that. So appreciate you getting back to us on that. Jennifer, here's the situation. Working in healthcare, I mandate that all my employees wear masks. The employees are compliant. Approximately 75% of the staff has been vaccinated based on the healthcare guidelines. If one of our members is exposed to COVID-19, then they may be sent home for up to 2 weeks if they are not vaccinated. If they are vaccinated, then they can stay home. They can stay at work if they don't have any symptoms. One of my staff members who was not vaccinated asked if she could be paid for not being at work based on the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Do I need to pay if the employee chooses not to get the vaccine? Unfortunately, the therapists are not able to treat all of our clients remotely, so I would need to assume that the employee would not be able to work once sent home. This is a concern because prior to the rollout of the vaccine, one of my admin staff had to work remotely for 2 months because of her children because their children had COVID at different times. Just curious what others are doing.
Yeah. So first off, at this point, the Families First Coronavirus Act, using the FMLA credit component, is voluntary. So statement number one is you don't have to do anything. Number two is that it was really targeted towards people that either got sick, but you didn't want to have to make them take sick time or PTO to take the time off. One. Two is they had to take care of someone that was sick. Or three, due to government order, they had to, be at home and they couldn't telework. So if you just think about that, all right, person's not sick, they're not taking care of anybody that's sick. So that's 1 and 2, not qualifying. 3 is, the person that has kids that has to work remotely, at this point, that's a choice. I mean, I know that sounds really harsh, but that's a choice. That's not mandatory because kids are back in school now. And as far as I know, and that's in CMS. And as far as I know, most daycare providers, I don't know of any that are still shut down. I mean, they were some of the first people that were back starting. So my point in saying that is that, it sounds like someone's not coming back just because they're afraid or whatever reason to come back because they haven't been vaccinated, can't get into their psychology. But that isn't something that was meant to, I mean, you could always apply for it and, say it, I suppose, but that wasn't really the original target of the credit. The credit was for the reasons that I specified.
Yeah, and I would say that also, there's some other factors that go into that as well. So healthcare industry, the particular employee, industry, what policies and procedures have been put in place? Have they been applied consistently across gender, across different types of work within the company? Is there possibility of allegations of discrimination, whether it's age discrimination, gender discrimination, those kind of things? So when I see that, it's like, okay, that triggers in my mind a little bit as to, okay, what are the facts and circumstances surrounding the work environment and the person that is impacted? And so all those variables go into the hopper as far as considering, the question is, do I need to pay this person or not? And so, yes, you have the analysis of what are the intentions of the act and other things, but then you also have the other legal issues and what I would classify as discriminatory, not necessarily based on race, gender, et cetera, but just implementation of policies that you've put in place or not put in place, or as I said before, put in place but not enforced consistently across your employment ranks.
All right, got a couple good questions in here. So here's the scenario from David. I wonder whether you've seen any banks taking PPP loan payments before the 18-month window. My client has a PPP loan from American Express, and when he did not file for forgiveness, they took a $50,000 payment after just 12 months. This is the 8-week covered period plus 10-month wait, rather than 18 months, the 24 weeks plus 10 months.
We haven't had a client that's happened to because we've, said, get your, let's get your act together and get your forgiveness application, or you still got a little bit more time. So we haven't had that circumstance happen. I think the running theory is that any payment that you end up making will end up getting refunded to you because you're going to still apply for the full forgiveness amount, but we haven't had anybody that's happened to yet because we've gone ahead and gotten the forgiveness application processed. I mean, what was, they weren't, in theory, they were supposed to assume that you were going to elect a longer cover period versus just saying, hey, we're going to start taking the money. So it seems because American Express is a non-traditional lending source, that's probably why this happened.
Mhm. Okay, next question is, we applied for forgiveness on 2/24/2021. It's my understanding there was and is a 60-day requirement time by the SBA to respond to the sent forgiveness program to the recipient of the loan. PayPal has verbalized to me that we may not hear from our loan officer until after Memorial Day, well beyond the 60-day SBA response time. I've negotiated to sell the company, but want to wait for the forgiveness of the loan to be granted to sign sell papers on the company. Any thoughts on the 60-day SBA response time and the wait to hear on forgiveness program to sell the company? Good question.
It is a good question. I actually thought that the window was supposed to be, and Jack, fact check me, so I'm going to talk for a little while if you don't mind. I thought the window was supposed to be 60 days for the bank to say okay. Then there was 90 days or so for the SBA to actually give the bank the money back. I had thought that with the decision to forgive, the SBA was effectively out of the loop on that and outsourcing that to the banks themselves, versus the banks having to wait on the SBA to do something other than just to get their money for applications they'd already forgiven. So don't quote me on that, but that, because I haven't looked at that in a little while, but that's what I recall the specific flow of time is that you submit, bank says okay, you're done. Then, oh, we got Robert saying SBA 60 days. Then you come back and then the banks get money from the SBA within a longer time period, which you should be disassociated from at that point.
So I thought, and I have an article here, may not be accurate, but lenders have, so you submit within the 10 months, 30 days to review, and the lenders do, and the SBA has another 90 days to agree or reject the determination. And so they were doing the numbers and saying that, loans made in 2021 means, 2022 or 2023. Now I'm reading this from an article that the title of it, and it was in the Washington Business Journal, but I was able to pull it up through the Charlotte Business Journal. PPP loan forgiveness process could drag out for 6 to 8 years. Now, they're really discussing the ones that have been denied, and then there's an appeals process or have been held up, et cetera. But this in what we were discussing a few minutes ago, IRS processes, SBA processes, capacity, ability, and all those things. So it doesn't surprise me. I didn't know that the banks or the SBA was giving the banks their authority to review and ultimately make a decision. I'm sure there's a lot of strings that are attached with that, or get out of jail cards attached with that when you start deputizing the lenders, or else they wouldn't even touch that unless they had the ability to be able to say, hey, look, we're doing what we told us to do, but don't come after us if we got it wrong on occasion, kind of thing. So
yeah, so I guess I'm kind of surprised by the person's timeline, because I had thought that the only window that you could have gotten hung up is the specific instance where you've sold the company, or literally have signed the agreement to sell the company. Then you would have to wait for the SBA determination, because otherwise the money's going in escrow. But what you're describing is, hey, I'm not even gonna, there is no offer to sell the business for all intents and purposes until I get forgiveness, then I'll sell it, which I would have thought would have been on the bank, not the SBA.
yeah, and as a side note too, there is a process, a published process for companies in flux, meaning in the process of a sale or transfer transaction, with respect to what has to happen with an application, money received, but the forgiveness has not been granted yet. So just be aware of that. And that's on, the SBA website and in other places. But, the people that, the lawyers and others handling that transaction should be able to point you into the right place so that you don't feel like you have to be held up on the sale just because you haven't received forgiveness yet.
All right, good questions today. And I don't know if this is true, but I heard that there could be additional delays because some of the SBA people have been trying to get their CDL and hazmat licenses so they could truck fuel to some of the places in Charlotte. I don't know. I read it on the internet. Said that Abraham Lincoln said it or something. I don't know.
In the Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
Gary's new band is called Gary and the Black Hole.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So can I give away some money now while we're waiting for more questions?
Oh, I was waiting for you to do that.
Okay. So I mentioned something at the beginning. Adam re-mentioned it. It's from a show. First person who tells me what it, and it's, well, I have a couple questions that I didn't know until I did some research. I got totally distracted this morning in doing some research on this show from, it's probably about a decade ago. So if I would just say it's the Dharma Initiative, if you know what show that's from, let me know. There's a certificate in there for you. And then and we'll go further into details if you know what those, if there's people who know what that. No.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, good question. That was a good guess, but no. Sorry, CJ.
Becky got it. All right. So she put it in the Q&A. So Becky,
Yeah.
do you know how many stations there were of the Dharma Initiative?
I feel like this is one of those my kids in the CMS test where somebody can just Google the answer right now.
Yes, exactly.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
I know, they made a shirt.
Look at
Yeah,
that.
that's pretty funny.
But here's what I wanted to share. And we are waiting for, well, if questions come up, we can answer them. But let's see, where did it go? There it is. All right. I can't, that's the answer.
Oh,
So
God.
there's a map. There's people. There's another really good map. And there's the clue. So no one else got it, but there's actually 9 stations. So.
You get far more into those shows than I do.
Well,
I feel like such an underachiever.
Well, I got the kids hooked on it, and there's also numbers, and there's the theme song, and they don't want to hear any of it. So and this shirt that I have, actually they make one with there's numbers in there that are bad luck numbers, and they made them, they put them on the bottom of the shirt, and I couldn't get the shirt. My wife said that my daughter would disown me if I did that, so I only went as far as I could. Anyway, okay, so that was the winner chicken dinner round. So I owe Becky. Do you have Becky, or maybe if you'll send to us your
Becky,
information?
Yeah, use the chat. Joe, Jack needs to get out more.
I do.
Yeah, for sure. So Becky, use the chat and send the panelists your contact information and basically what you need. Do you need just an email address, Jack?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, because he can send that Starbucks card virtually. If you could just do the same thing with gas, that'd be really cool. But
Good Lord.
It's funny because Adam's just smirking because he's got an electric car. He doesn't have to worry about it.
Really been a non-event for me, folks. laughing all the way into the plug-in.
Yeah, my in-laws are worried about driving back to Alabama because they've got a range of 400 miles, but they've got to drive 500. So Gas Buddy is going to be everybody's friend. Gas Buddy. All right, so Becky, do hit us up.
No, Joe, I don't believe in Bitcoin.
Didn't I see something that Elon Musk is doing a reverse on his position on Bitcoin?
Yes.
I thought he did a 180 with PayPal or something. Okay, good. So you got it there, Jack. You got Becky's email?
Yep. Yes.
Cool. It's captured. And enjoy the Starbucks. Any other questions before we call it a day and I go into Charleston? It's too cold to go in the ocean today, though. Whew.
So I have a public service announcement. It's the same one that I do every once in a while. And I got caught. So yes, I am a nerd. I was on the technology committee for our law firm, and I call it Jack IT. So this weekend on Sunday, I went around to my parents' house and hooked up 2 new printers, and it took longer than it should have. And went to my in-laws' house and kind of did sort of the same thing. So my point is that I should know better, but our own internal IT people got me, and they sent me a thing that looked like a totally legitimate Amazon acknowledgement, and it wasn't asking for anything. And I'm like, okay, well, let me see what it is, because they gave you like the number, the product or the order number, and I clicked it, and then all of a sudden, like, and I want to say, I want to make it more dramatic than it really was. Like, skull and crossbones came up on my screen, but that didn't happen. It basically says that you have been the victim of a phishing attack, and blah, 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 SLK IT team. And so I wrote back to the IT team and I said, well done, basically, because you got me. My point is that there's just so much stuff out there. I mean, and I'm the one who am telling you to beware of this stuff, and I got sucked into this myself. So just be careful out there with things that look legit. Just be very cautious. And there were hints, like it said Joseph, which is my real first name, instead of Jack. My Amazon account is with, it says Jack. It's Jack Santaniello. It's not Joseph. There's no Joseph anywhere on my Amazon account. So things like that. But it looked totally legit, and I'm doing my own thing. I'm like, okay, you know what I really thought, and I hope my wife doesn't see this. I'm like, what did my wife just order? Or what did my kids just order? Is really the first thought that came through my mind. Like, okay, what else? But, and that's why I was like, okay, let me take a pause and go look and see what just happened. And I got caught. So anyway, point is, again, just be careful. They're really good at scamming.
Nice ocean, Gary.
I wish you guys could
We're all
see
jealous.
this
Now you're
ocean.
teasing us. Now you're teasing us.
It's pretty. Oh, man. Well, you guys did a great job again today, and I hope you can pull some strings with the Senate in North Carolina and get them off their butts, and also get some more gas into Charlotte. That'd be great. We'll look forward to getting this thing posted up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on today. Thank you, Rachel, for doing that. And guys, you have a wonderful rest of the day and week, and I will be thinking about you from Battery Park.
We'll be down there in a couple hours. You still have that extra bedroom, right? So we'll be down there in a little bit.
We actually do. We have an extra room. So you guys have a great one. Thank you again.
All right. See ya.
Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.